Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. Today's guests are two very distinguished men, Senator Bobby Starr and local oncologist Dr. Les Lockridge. We're here to talk about not only cancer, but a piece of legislation that might just help local cancer patients. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Great to be here, Scott.
All right, Dr. Lockridge, you have been down in the halls of the State House with your senator over here trying to work on a piece of legislation. Can you explain it just a little bit?
Yeah, first of all, I should definitely say thank you to Bobby for the opportunity to go down there and address the committee and to meet the people that work down there. It was really a privilege. It was very scary. You've spent enough time down at the State House. You know how it can be sitting in front of the microphone. But everybody was very nice to me and very welcoming and very sympathetic. The idea behind the bill that we're trying to push forward is to deliver the best quality cancer care to rural communities possible. To do that, we have to make it self-sufficient. There has to be a salient way to deliver oncology care and advanced hematology care to a community, or it's just not going to happen. The bill has to do with 340B pricing, which is a very complicated issue, but in a nutshell, hospitals and other 340B institutions enjoy paying approximately 60% of what private companies will pay for the same medicine. Obviously, that affects the bottom line a lot and affects the feasibility of being able to deliver that kind of care to a community.
And Senator Starr, you actually have two reasons for being here. Is not only are you, I think you've been in the Senate for almost as long as I've been alive. How long have you been there?
Well, between the two, the House and the Senate, this is my 40th year.
Well, I was 12 years old when
I
you
thought
went down.
you had trouble voting for me that first time.
I would have. I would have voted for you though. But you're also Dr. Lockridge's patient, and you have cancer.
Yes, and very fortunate to be a patient of Dr. Lockridge's. You know, if it wasn't for his expertise and knowledge and abilities, I would have gone along with my colon cancer until I really got in serious trouble. But he was sharp enough and capable enough as being a patient from many years to pick it up and knowing that there was something wrong. But we've been talking about trying to get an oncology infusion center here in Newport for a couple of years, basically.
Because North Country lost theirs.
Well, they couldn't afford to do it, or the doctors that they had left. And it's really an injustice to our people that have cancer, and they're already, deathly ill and sick, and then they have to chase off to Hanover or Burlington. If you get lucky, you might get into St. Jay or Copley. But anyway you cut it, you've got to go over Sheffield Heights to go south, and you've got to go down through Eden Notch to go the other way. And especially this time of year, it's very difficult. And it isn't fair that our people have to spend all this time traveling when they're sick to start with. And then, but if you live in Burlington, they drive by your door with a public transit pick you up, deliver you to the door at the UVM Medical Center, and then they'll re-pick you up at the medical center and drop you off at home. So while our people are up here struggling to get to their treatment, the folks that live in the metropolitan area, more populated areas, they have all the services and it's much easier for them. So I see it as an access to proper care, and I also see it as an economic issue. That we're one of the poorest regions in the state, but yet it's costing us the most for this care, adequate care, and it's not fair, it's not right, and I think I've talked with the CEO at the hospital, and seems to be interested in working with us to kind of correct this lack of proper care for our citizens. And of course, Dr. Lockridge has, gone way beyond the call of duty to help provide that if we can get this going.
This seems a little bit to me as like as you know, I've served in the Vermont House and that, but it seems to me a bit like the dialysis center.
Yeah.
The need arose. Well, actually, it was probably always here, but we also were underserved, and I would suspect that Claudio Fort and the rest of the crew at North Country will jump on and help you the same way as because they were very instrumental, especially Dr. Ron Holland,
Yep.
about getting that dialysis center here. And I have to believe that Claudio and crew understand that, that they want what is best for their patients. Are you finding that's the case from talking to him?
It's very similar to the dialysis unit, and my family, the Starr family, has a real problem with bad kidneys, and my dad had a dialysis machine right at home for many years, and then my Uncle Jack, he came along, he had it, and he actually bought a house over on the other side of the mountain because he didn't feel good enough traveling from Troy to St. Albans 3 times a week. So he would stay at his place over the mountain after he had his treatment, but every family can't do that, and that was critical to get that dialysis unit here in Newport. And this one, I think the Cancer Infusion Center is maybe even more important than that, because I think we, and Dr. Lockridge can talk on this, but we have a tremendous number of people in this area that have cancer. And I don't know, Doc, if you want to jump in and give those stats on what happens like statewide and national, and how those numbers are terrible up here.
Yeah, sure.
On the cure.
It's really interesting data, and it does really reflect the disparity of care between here and really any urban center. First of all, we enjoy a pretty low incidence of cancer in Vermont in general. This is not a surprise. We lack a lot of the environmental exposures of more urban states, radiation, chemicals, etc. So we, as a state, we enjoy a relatively low incidence of cancer. In the Northeast Kingdom, our incidence of cancer, and this surprises a lot of people, is even lower than the state in general. Unfortunately, that doesn't translate into good outcomes for us, because we have a death rate from cancer that's not only higher than the rest of the state on average, but is actually approaching national levels. So it's actually kind of counteracted the advantage that we have from having such a natural environment. And there's very few things that are going to cause that particular situation where you don't develop as much cancer, but more of it is deadly. And one of those situations clearly is lack of access to care. People are either developing or being diagnosed with cancer at a later stage, or they're not getting the care once the cancer is diagnosed.
You know, the other thing I think, I don't know if we're more stubborn than the rest of the state, is I think some people, if it isn't broken, they don't want to fix it. And that sometimes comes down to not actually going to the doctors for preventative health care. And as you know, there's always a shortage of even just primary care doctors here, because I'm not sure what your wait time is, but certainly you probably have some pretty serious cases of people who do have advanced cancer.
Yeah, that's true. And even more than waiting to have your cancer diagnosed, which, don't get me wrong, that is a problem. My office is booking a few months out, and I think that might be even shorter than the average around here. But even more than that, I think people have a higher standard for what they will accept in the way of medical treatment. They're not just going to do whatever the doctor tells them to do. They're not going to necessarily spend all their resources on a treatment plan. They're not necessarily going to put themselves out of their regular life to such a great extent to go get care. And when they hear that the closest place that they can go for their care is Burlington, a lot of people are just going to say no. And they're going to miss out on a lot of benefits, a lot of potential benefits that treatment could provide them.
Now, you're able to provide, like Senator Starr here, with a certain amount of care, though, in your office, but not all.
That's correct.
No, I have to, every move I make is scheduled by Dr. Lockridge, and I wouldn't have it any other way because of, his commitment to the people of this area and the caring that he shows to his patients. But I have to go over to Morrisville to get my infusions, and you might not think that much of that just run down to Morrisville, but you run down to Morrisville and something isn't just right, you don't get your infusion. So back you come. You've lost a half a day of your time, and at my age it probably doesn't matter much. But if you're 35, 40 years old and you have a job that you have to earn a living at, and you have to lose a half a day, but things aren't right, instead of driving to Newport and finding that out, you're an hour away. And that's why it's an major economic issue, besides having, I guess the simplest way to put it for our people, I'd rather be a big fish in a little pond up here than I would to be a little fish in a great big pond like in Burlington, where you're just a number moving along the system to get your treatment. And, of course, I had my operation at North Country. Dr. Sisson, did an excellent job. You couldn't ask for better care. And Dr. Lockridge would stop in every day to see how I was doing. Larry Sisson would stop and see how I was doing. And if you're in a big hospital, they're going to come when they're ready to come. And, you know, we all kind of know that if we don't hang together, we're going to hang separately. So we look after each other and care for each other.
And I suspect that Dr. Lockridge kind of knows, since he's your primary care physician too, correct?
No,
Okay.
Megan Batchelor.
Oh, okay.
But
I think you've had him long enough
for years.
for him to know
Well,
that what is ordinary for you, but which maybe isn't ordinary for somebody else. So he really
Well,
knows you.
yeah, and to get that straight with the people, must have been 8-10 years ago,
Yeah.
because Dr. Tatum was still alive at that point. I had a problem with a low white blood count, and he said, you better go see Dr. Lockridge. So we met, and he didn't like the looks of my white count. And so I said, well, you know, we're going to get some more opinions here because it looked like I might have leukemia. And so they made arrangements in Burlington. I went down there for a day and had 2 or 3 doctors, specialists look at me, and they said, well, you better go home, get ready for chemo for your leukemia. And I don't know, I was probably 60 at that point in time, or yeah, 65.
60, 62, somewhere in there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I came home and I said, to hell with getting all pumped full of chemo. And I told these guys, I said, you know, so be it, I'm not going to get chemo. And Tatum and Lockridge kept checking and kept testing, and they said, well, it is really odd that you've got leukemia. We think it's something else. So they got me into NIH, the National Institute of Health over in Bethesda, Maryland. And 3 days down there, those doctors came back and said, well, we figured out your problem, and it's not leukemia. And we don't know who your doctors are up there in Vermont, but you've got 2 damn clever doctors up there looking after you. And so ever since then, we do blood counts and blood checks, and that's how Dr. Lockridge just happened to find my cancers because of my red cells.
We only have about 10 minutes left. So where do we go from now? And what does legislature need to do, and what does the hospital administration need to do to make this happen? Well, and you.
That's a good question. We're optimistic going forward. Everything seems to be falling into place with it, but the hospital's going to have a crucial role. Like everything, the devil's in the details, and the way that a law is actually practiced is what is going to dictate reality and is going to dictate outcomes. We're going to need some help from them. We're going to need some help from their pharmacy. We're going to need help from a lot of different factions at the hospital, and that's assuming that the bill gets passed. This is a long process, of course. Everything looks good on that end so far, but we're going to need some local help. There's no doubt.
So how's the bill doing so far? Dr. Lockridge testified, but having served in the State House myself, I also know usually there's other people who have testified. Have other people testified yet?
Yes, certainly I testified
Right.
as the lead, the sponsor of the legislation. They had Devin Green, who works for the Hospital Association she testified, but her testimony was not accurate, and the legal people for the Legislative Council counteracted her testimony. Her testimony was that it couldn't be done, that the way the federal law is written, you can't have a private practitioner administering drugs under 340B. But as long as Dr. Lockridge has a contract with the hospital, then it is legal to be able to do that. And so Legislative Council came in and they supported the bill as it's written. Also, I've talked with Al Gobe, who's now the Secretary of the Agency of Human Services, and he said that this could happen. And he also put me in contact with Mrs. Backus, who's the head person for the Green Mountain Care Board in regards to access to care. And there's no reason, according to him, that the Green Mountain Care Board couldn't help North Country with some cost differences so we can have the same access to care as other citizens do elsewhere in Vermont. So, I've got at least Al Gobe on our side, and that's a big plus, I think. Of course, the best way in the world to make this all happen is not to have to pass legislation. The best way to have this happen would be for Claudio Fort, the CEO at the hospital, and Dr. Lockridge to work out a system between themselves. And that would be the best outcome. But if that doesn't happen, or if it can't happen, then we'll pass legislation in Montpelier. So far, things have been fairly smooth. I know I'm going to check back in with the CEO at the hospital, and I'll give him a week or two to work with Dr. Lockridge to see how they're doing. But Claudio Fort was very, when I met with him for 2 hours a week ago today, seemed to be very supportive of this and seemed to understand the hardships that our people are going through that have cancer. So if the hospital, can see their way clear, we'll be in good shape maybe in 6 or 9 months from now.
So, and you're all set up for go, right?
We're set up to give probably 60% of the treatments that people would need as their first line or next line therapy. Cytotoxic chemotherapy is a different issue entirely. That's USP 800. That takes a while to get up and running, and it takes quite a bit of money. And that's partly the idea behind this 340B pricing, is that it will offset the costs of doing those treatments outside of the drugs. But we are set certainly in terms of personnel and in terms of space.
And you're the only oncologist in Orleans County, correct?
I believe so. I'm really quite certain.
How our travel distance that we have to go, Senator Starr, how do we rank according to other regions as for cancer care? Do we have to travel the furthest, or?
I think the only ones that might have to go further would be if they were in Canaan,
right,
Essex
up in the tip of Essex County, because they would end up having to go to Littleton or on down to Hanover. But as far as Vermont, if you get away from that little corner up in Essex County, like Island Pond people, they would come to Newport. The more populous areas would come to Newport if we could provide that service. And plus, it's going to employ some people in good jobs. Plus, if those people come and they need to stop at a store, they're going to buy stuff and spend money. But if you're in Dartmouth Hitchcock or in Burlington or in St. Jay or in Morrisville, you may stop there, but you're going to spend your money there. And that, as I said earlier, our money should be spent here as long and as much as possible.
Here's a question for you, Dr. Lockridge. You're you were trained at, was it Yale?
That's right.
And you've been associated with Dana Farber?
I had a clinic at Dana-Farber.
Why do you stay here in the Northeast Kingdom where you have to fight for everything to help the people? You know, wouldn't it be easier just to say?
Easier, but it would be for somebody else. I'm really quite lucky. We've got the best patients in the world, and that really is the truth. It's not a matter of public relations. We have the nicest people in the world coming to my clinic, and we have wonderful lives here. You know, having a good life does not necessarily mean you have an easy life, and that's a trade that I'm willing to make every day.
Okay, what are your final words, Senator Starr?
Well, I just hope that if people are listening and they have an opportunity to speak to Dr. Lockridge or Claudio Fort, they will promote the idea of having our own clinic here in the kingdom for our citizens, because that's what it's all about. Is providing that service to people so they don't have to be punished to go get the service. And then we'll try to bring that number down so that our outcomes are as good as the rest of the state. But it's going to take a lot of work and help from a lot of people.
Okay. And your final words, Dr. Lockridge?
Mainly just gratitude. I really appreciate what Senator Starr is doing for us and for the community. And to you for having us on to trumpet the cause. Everything looks like it's falling into place at this point. We do have a meeting with hospital administration next week, and from what I understand, they're showing support early. But we can use all the support we can get. So anybody out there, if you think that there's something you can do, I encourage you to explore that.
Okay, well, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks for all your work you're doing for the community, and hopefully you're down here for another 40 years.
Well, it depends on Doc.
Yeah, I was going to say here, can you tune him up to keep him down here another 40?
I don't think he really wants to make that drive for another 40 years.
Well, we are the kingdom. The capital
Yeah,
might be able to come to the kingdom.
I think that's a good
the
solution.
kingdom.
So, all right, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.